covered everything now, all the way from drums to bass to guitar. So I'm going to cover the vocals now. And it's been a little while since I've opened up this mix file, so we'll have to see what I've done. And the vocal chain is actually quite long. I've actually frozen most of the vocal tracks, apart from this intro one and the main lead vocal. But before we get to the actual mixing of the vocal tracks, I want to kind of explain what I've done before I've even attempted to start mixing. First of all, I've run them all through manually through Melodyne, which means I'm manually pitching stuff. So I'm ignoring stuff that sounds just about right. So I'm using my intuition on what sounds pitchy or not. If it sounds definitely wrong, then I can either tweak it or get Rob to re-record the vocal. And another thing that I'm doing is manual clip gain. So these are all Melodyne bounced tracks, but I've actually just added some clip gain. So I wanted to sound right even before it goes through the compressor. Obviously, it won't be on the same level, but word to word, it needs to sound pretty much like what you would want it to, especially with the soft starts and ends of words. So if it's in quite a built-up section, take the word don't. It could be like that at the end, needs boosting to get that through. Otherwise, it'll just sound like don't. If that's a good analogy, I guess. Having the clip gain it just makes things a bit easier. I know there's some Reaper specific plugins, a bit like Vocal Rider, but it's a compressor that is built directly in and will do clip gain for the thing. But I'm just manually tweaking the volumes because why not? So I'm just going to solo this. So you can see here, this is where there's like a soft end to a word, where I've not wanted him to re-record it because it sounds fine if I just boost it up a little bit. I know you can have 0 in the middle. I just, for some reason, this is a newer Reaper setup, so I haven't set it to make it a bit easier. So it can go up to +6, so that's fine.
Mine, working as a hive.
So working as a hive. So the end of the word hive, it can get a bit lost when it's full of guitars and everything. So I've just brought that back up, added it in again. So the next thing to do, use our favorite Soothe. I'm going to unmute the effects. So this is my vocal chain. It's long and possibly unnecessary, but I'm quite new to mixing vocals. I've tried to do justice to what Rob's voice should sound like. So each step, there is a reason behind it, but I wasn't expecting it to get to get this much. So I've frozen most of the vocal tracks because I've split it in order to mix it a little bit easier. So this is just a few lines of the first verse. So we've got Soothe, so that'll tame some of the brash higher end in some places and works a little bit like a de-esser as well, kind of.
Many bodies, single mind, working as a hive.
So it's not doing too much. And then we've got this other thing. It's called Equalizer by Waves Factory. I think I've mentioned it in the previous videos, where it's a little bit like Bloom, but I didn't have Bloom at that point, and we'll kind of equalize the sound to be, I guess, more representative of like the pink noise spectrum. So that's doing a little bit.
Stampede, many bodies.
I think what I probably could have done was just, make sure it doesn't do anything to the lower frequencies, maybe up to like 100 or something. But it is what it is, because I'm filtering it anyway, I think, using these EQs. So I'm just cutting a bunch off with the EQ and then do a small dip there. There must have been like a bit of a resonance there if I'm only dipping it by 1.59. So this is more like corrective EQ. So these first thing are preparing the sound for sweetening up later on. So that'll happen from here. So with the virtual mix rack, I think it's just a Neve EQ. So we're boosting a little bit. I think, I've taken like a standard vocal chain, but I've deleted everything apart from the Neve EQ and boosting a little bit of high there. And now we go into the compressing stage, 76, doing pretty standard vocal things on that, ratio of 12. We're trying to catch the peaks and make it like flatter. And then our second stage, we got the LA2A, which I got for Universal Audio, and it's doing very much what you would classically do with vocals. 2-stage compressor. I think that there should be multiple YouTube videos out there for this kind of thing. bit more DS, so it must have been some of the S's may have been coming through too much, even with the soothe. And I think as well, if we're compressing, that will have just brought it back out anyway. So I think taming it back down with this Pro DS.
There's one machine, an ever-growing colony of footfalls in a great stampede.
So it's quite a wide frequency band I'm dealing with, but it actually doesn't sound too bad. I think if it were put in too heavily, it would sound a bit lispy. And then what we have, so I think after the DS is more like creative effects based on what is going on at the time. So with Radiator, I've done a lot of this throughout the song, where it's funny, I've kind of only just realized the Sound Toys Radiator, like what it does and how it sounds, and I really like the sound of it. So using that for dirtying up the vocals a lot, just getting a bit of saturation in there, and it sounds really cool.
Heartbeat Summer's one machine, an ever-growing colony of footfalls in a great stampede. Many bodies, single mind, working as a hive. How they all came to be, raging as a conscious sea.
Nice. Yeah, I really like that effect that it gives. And I've not used it too heavily throughout the whole track. It's definitely easy to go overboard with vocal effects, but because it's such a long track, I feel like if we overused lots of different effects, it would get quite tiring. So I've consciously decided that on very certain bits, there will be effects going on. Obviously, there's always going to be effects going on, but it's like the kind of audible ones that need to be tamed, really. This is a snap heap, literally just with ensemble on. So
colony of footfalls in a great stampede. Many bodies, single mind, working.
Yeah, just a little bit of chorus on there. So I really like the CLA vocals. I'm not using it for anything except just a little bit of widening, like stereo effect, which is also a little bit of a chorus effect.
Colony of footfalls in a great stampede. Many bodies, single mind, working as a hive.
That gives a kind of more full vocal effect when it's just a single vocal line amongst everything else. So I just wanted it to really be elevated above everything.
Unlike all we've ever seen, the Heartbeat Summer's one machine, an ever-growing colony, footfalls in a great stampede. Many bodies, single mind, working as a hive. How they all came to be, raging as a conscious sea.
Cool. Yeah, so the end vocal note was a lot longer previously, so I decided to shorten it because it goes over the guitar if it's coming in, and it was easy enough to just crossfade it. That's a pretty big crossfade. If it didn't have a lot of music in there, it would be quite obvious. It's amazing what you can get away with editing vocals in a rock mix. Say if you're just doing voiceover editing something like this, it would be pretty bad to have a big crossfade in there. It would sound pretty especially bad. Yeah, like voiceover editing, video games and everything like that. It needs to be fully audible in isolation. Otherwise, the client will be like, what's going on? Whereas with music, you can get away with all kinds of shit, which is great. Right, let's move on to the intro. So the intro vocals is very much the same base of plugins, but we're using a lot of different effects in certain places. So I'm going to solo this now, actually, because it's kind of cool. It maybe could even be too subtle. I think one of my mates listened to this and he was like, oh, you could have done a bit more with the effects on the intro there, but it's like, oh, you just got to listen to it. But yeah, maybe it's my bad, but we'll put it in isolation now.
All the souls we couldn't save, droplets in a tidal wave, grains of sand falling past the desert in an hourglass, stars inside again.
So desert in an hourglass. So I put it through a resonator from Kilohertz, fading up a resonator. Obviously, the key is in A, so it's already in there anyway. Just the word hourglass, you could put an impulse response on there that's, a jar, but it sounds kind of a similar effect to just putting it through a resonator on A.
Falling past the desert in an hourglass, stars.
And then just a little bit of a filter. It's the non-linear filter as well by Kilohertz, so it gives a little bit of saturation as well, even though I'm doing quite like a big bandpass there, but I'm super saturating it.
Stars inside a galaxy, days until eternity, all is one, one and all, cells comprise an animal.
Bringing in a bit of distortion on that line, and then on this later one, I'm actually just doing a stutter. I didn't know at first if this bit should have been done, but I think it worked out pretty well and people seem to like it.
Motionless in a trance, victims of a circumstance, rising up from the dirt, ever reaching heaven's word, growing tall, climbing high, closer to the sky, pulsing signals through the wire, embers in a forest fire.
It automates up a bit crusher on the stutter, which I thought was pretty cool. And then once it's building up, I'm bringing in a bit more distortion, and then bringing up a big delay at the end, which puts it nicely into the riff, which I thought was cool. Turns out on Echo Boy, you have to make sure that it's not going to glide. Got to set glide to off, otherwise it will usually do a weird pitch bend because it's trying to be tape, and that's good in many situations, but I want it to be exactly correct each time I've played this. So this is how it sounds.
In a forest fire.
I think it's pretty neat.
With all that I can see, and live inside this world for all eternity, and even could escape this cruel reality, drifted, lost in a fantasy.
Backing vocals. So as with the lead vocals, they are manually tuned, but I've gone harsher with the tuning for the backing vocals because the lead vocals need to sound more natural, and the backing vocals, because they're quieter, you can get away with a bit more heavy tuning. That's not to say they should be like robotic. As well as that, I've not clip gain automated them because we're going to compress them almost at the same time. We do have an individual channel strip for them, but instead of doing clip gain, what we're doing, we're shifting the importance onto timing. So every backing vocal is manually aligned to the lead vocal or the previous backing vocal. Vocal line just makes it too perfect. If you listen to it, it's great for certain things, but I don't want it to sound too perfect because it might, I guess, spoil the authenticity of it. I mean, saying that, you're meant to do whatever serves the song, and I thought manually doing it works for me, and it reflects the amount of attention I want to give everything in this. So every part of this production, I'm a bit of a control freak about, so I want to make sure that it's all correct anyway. So yeah, doing manually time aligning things and then bouncing it in place. So yeah, everything says is glued. That's because I've time aligned it. With Reaper, you can put stretch markers in. I've got Shift W to add them here, so it's like you can add them. So I would have had the lead vocal up there, visible, obviously audible, and then I would add markers and time align them accordingly. So let's take this part, for example.
If I could be at one with all that I can see, and live inside this world for all eternity, and even could escape this cruel reality, drifting, lost in a fantasy.
So that's quite an example of quite non-standard harmony in there. It's quite a difficult one to do, but they're pretty well aligned. They're not super heavily edited. I think the breaths in there, they're quiet enough that they're not standing out, and I don't think they were getting in the way too much. So with the lead vocal.
If I could be at one with all that I can see, and live inside this world for all eternity, and even could escape this cruel reality, drifting, lost in a fantasy.
Cool. Yeah, so pretty tight. I think, yeah, if I was going to go overboard, I probably would have edited them way tighter. It definitely sounds like it. I probably should have done that, but, hindsight, and I didn't affect it. Got a much more cut down channel strip for these, so we don't have soothe on there. We just got a little bit. We've got some equalizer, which will help the kind of time domain EQ issues. We've got a bit of the same, so because we're recording in the same room, same time, I've added the same EQ probably just copy and pasted. It sounds fine. Maybe I should have filtered it a bit higher. It's like, why would I need such a full range? But it sounds okay to me. Same thing with the virtual mix rack. So yeah, we've got the CLA 76 because I didn't have the UAD one, which I do now, but does the same thing. Sounds fine. CLA and then Pro DS. So yeah, we got the kind of bare bones of the lead vocal channel strip there. So going on to sends. So these backing vocals are in a backing vocal folder, which have their own sends to reverb and a dirt. So if I want to push up some distortion for the backing vocal there. For the backing vocal reverb, we've got some altiverb. So yeah, I've chosen a nice hall there. The lead vocals, we do have sends for this as well. Yeah, we've got reverb and a delay. So the reverb is actually just a plate. So yeah, we've gone for a plate reverb on there. Got delay, Echo Boy Jr. You can't go wrong with Echo Boy Jr., I don't think. I'm not sure why I would need the full version Echo Boy when I just need a delay that works. We have the lead vocals, we have the reverb and delay, but we're also going to another reverb that's a lexicon reverb. This is very slightly sent into this to, I guess, ground everything. So I want it to not sound like it's always there. It just needs to give the illusion of being in a much larger space. And I think this delivers that.
And all I want is truth and meaning, something greater.
So it's actually very subtle with the vocal, but it does add a little bit of something, adds a little bit of depth and wideness there. So alongside the backing vocal track, we have a choir track, and I've actually bounced everything. I think I've like frozen everything and bounced it to a stereo track. And the choir is any backing vocals that are underneath that. So we have certain parts like this. So yeah, it's quite a lot of reverb, quite a lot of chorus, and like quite widely panned as well, because we've got several tracks going on. Yeah, like up to 10 tracks really. Yeah, it's quite hard to make sure it doesn't get in the way of stuff. So I think one of the struggles I have is pushing stuff far enough back that you know that it's there and it's clear, but it's not getting in the way of stuff and masking it. We're going to move on to the master track and the kind of vocal mixing ethos that I've been using that a lot of people do use. So the lead vocal bus has quite a few sends here. We have a master track that has everything in there. This means I can freely put master plugins on there without actually having to put master plugins on the Reaper master, where if I want to reference a track, it means the reference track isn't going through the master thing. So it's just a good thing to do. I only did that quite late on because it was getting annoying. So all of the stuff that isn't vocal lives in music, and then vocal lives outside of that. Within vocal, in the lead vocal, I want to affect certain things in the music, and it's mainly using track spacer to duck certain aspects of the music using the vocal. And whilst I could have done this, say, on just the music bus, which I deleted, in fact, I'm actually ducking things that aren't the drums. So I want the drums to always be the same power, whereas I want the lead vocal to be able to duck the guitar and the keys. And I didn't think that it would get too much in the way of bass. So I'm having it duck the guitars and the keys, so kind of more the mid-range that would occupy the vocal space. So if you look here, we've got track spacer on the bass, which is being ducked by the kick, which is great, whereas the guitar is being ducked by the vocal. So and we're like severely band limiting what this track spacer can actually do. So yeah, we've got quite a low cut and a high cut. And then we've got the same on the keys. Obviously, I don't think they get too much in the way of the keys because then there's not as many of them, but it's necessary in certain places. Sometimes it's necessary to automate the track spacer in certain places, because a lot of people often say it's a good way of having completely transparent vocals and mix, but it's not transparent. And if you do start to hear it, you can hear it in quite a lot of like modern mixes actually. So like the vocals come in and it's like everything's still powerful, but it just kind of feels, stuff does get a bit squished. So you've got to be quite careful with it to make it more transparent. So say if a vocal is trailing after something that needs to be more powerful, I have automated the track spacer to not work as hard for those certain parts. On this passage here, I'm automating the track spacer to be doing nothing on the guitars because it really impacts this section coming in when the trailing note is ducking stuff spectrally. So.
Escape this cruel reality, drifted, lost in a fantasy.
Whereas if I didn't have that, the guitars come in and it just feels crushed.
Reality, drifted, lost in a fantasy.
So that's the thing. So it doesn't sound too bad when it's happening, but then when the vocal releases it, it suddenly just pops in. So it sounded bad. So I wanted that section to specifically start where the vocals aren't as important anymore after that point. It's the guitars that are doing everything that they need to.
Escape this cruel reality, drifted, lost in a fantasy.
Talking about the master fader, I didn't want to master the song as such, but I want to send it to the mastering people with at least kind of a coherent, nice mix. And it's always good to mix into like a mastering chain. I mean, some people will say otherwise, and I think I've mentioned earlier that it doesn't really matter. Do what sounds good. And I thought it sounded good. So this new plugin came out called Bloom. I'm using that. It sounds fucking great. So this is automatically making the mix sound nicer based on a few parameters. I do suggest watching videos of how this can be used, and it's great on the master track as well as bus track. Got UAD as well, so Fairchild is doing a little bit of like gentle compression.
Needing something greater to believe in, this could be the way to exercise belonging for.
Yeah, I didn't want any compression to go over the kind of 2 dB mark. A little bit of EQ, taming a bit of mids. A little bit of 217K, I guess it might have been a bit harsh there. Very slight amount. And then a little bit of limiting. No, I think I've just added some gain. I think that's literally all I'm doing. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I think I've covered most of the main bits of the mix, but there's a possibility I might do a bit of a follow-up for certain other aspects. So like little creative mix bits that I've done to help certain sections or anything to do with the keys, but I don't think there's anything special that I'm doing with the keys at the moment, apart from just making sure that it fits in okay. So thanks for listening.